Are you ready to make the most of your oil and gas mineral rights? Welcome to the Mineral Rights Podcast. Get the knowledge and resources you need to manage your minerals and royalties. Here is your host, Matt Sands.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Mineral Rights Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Matt Sands, and I'm here to help you make the most of your mineral rights and royalties. And Justin Williams, who is here again today to provide the individual mineral owner perspective. Hi, Justin.
Hi, Matt. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on the show. We're going to talk about mineral rights news. So this will be the first in a series of episodes that we're going to cover monthly on the latest news as it relates to mineral rights and kind of how it will impact you as a mineral owner. So hopefully this is useful. And if you want to hear more content like this, please let us know. And with that, if you do need to get in touch with us, if you want to leave a question for us to be featured on an upcoming episode or a comment, go to mineralrightspodcast.com, or you can send an email to feedback@mineralrightspodcast.com. And please subscribe to the show on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast and leave us an honest rating and review. It only takes a minute and we read every one of them and definitely appreciate any feedback you have. So, Justin, you want to dive right in?
Absolutely. Let's dive right into the news stories. And the first one here is dealing with Colorado. Lawsuits targeting mineral rights pooling. The entity behind last fall's defeated ballot in Colorado, seeking to impose a 2,500-foot setback between oil and gas facilities and things such as home and waterways this week, sued over another matter, what's called the forced pooling of non-consenting mineral right owners in order to drill wells. Colorado Rising sued in federal court Wednesday on behalf of mineral right owners in Broomfield, saying the forced pooling provision of the Colorado Oil and Gas Act is unconstitutional. The practice of forced pooling is, in essence, a taking of private property for corporate gain by order of the states and Anlene Foster of Colorado Rising. Forced pooling is a perfect example of Colorado's inadequate oil and gas laws that must be updated in accordance with modern technology, including horizontal fracking and practice of residential drilling, also by Anlene Foster of Colorado Rising. Dan Haley of the Colorado Oil and Gas Association responded in a statement. This lawsuit exposes the charade of Colorado Rising's failed 2,500-foot setback measure, as they repeatedly claimed during the campaign that horizontal drilling would overcome that extreme distance. Yet technical experts and regulators saw it for what it was, an attempt to ban industry. Turning their argument on its head, now they are going after horizontal drilling itself, as pooling is essential for modern-day horizontal drilling. Make no mistake, Colorado Rising is all about shutting down energy production. Forced pooling lets oil and gas companies pull minerals in a given area so that all the oil and gas within it is developed and none is wasted. It's designed to foster efficient and orderly development, and its benefits include maximizing severance and income tax revenues to governments. In my opinion, Matt, this is something that the oil and gas companies, they have to be able to do so that they can get the mineral right owners who are involved what they are owed in producing their minerals.
I totally agree. Yeah, I think that, so this is a case, I think, of out-of-state activists coming in and trying to shut down energy production, like Dan said. I think that, like you mentioned, when you have a mineral owner that is on board with having their minerals developed, as is the case when you have minerals that have been passed down over generations, you have potentially hundreds of owners in a particular drilling spacing unit. So the fact that what they're trying to say is you'd have potentially some of those mineral owners being able to hold the others hostage, getting involved with wanting to keep the minerals in the ground for maybe health and safety, environmental reasons was what Colorado Rising makes the claim that is why it should be not allowed. So again, I think this is just another case of trying to ban oil and gas, unfortunately, in the state of Colorado. I do think that there potentially could be some changes, and maybe it is something where they can come up with some better provisions for mineral owners. In other words, come up with maybe a higher statutory royalty rate to help provide fairness, because most of the time, if you're going to go and voluntarily lease, you're going to get a much higher royalty. So, these are the things that could be beneficial about having the COGCC take a look at this, and for the state legislature to take a look at revising state statutory pooling regulations, but it'll be interesting to see where this goes. Again, this is another bump in the road, in my opinion, for the state of Colorado, unfortunately.
Right. And I think a lot of people don't realize as well that there are certain ways, and we've talked about it in surface use agreements and lease agreements. There are ways that farmers can be protected and different people. And sometimes it may not be as cynical as somebody who just absolutely does not want a will drilled. Maybe that person can't be found or they cannot locate that person after due diligence. And it's holding up the whole shebang for everybody else who is willing.
Anyway, the next article we have is in Pennsylvania. It's Thompson introduces bill to clarify law on mineral rights in national forests. And this is coming from Congressman Glenn Thompson, who's hoping the third time's a charm with a bill regarding mineral rights on national forests, including the Allegheny. The Republican congressman for the 15th District of Pennsylvania introduced Friday H.R. 245, the Cooperative Management of Mineral Rights Act of 2019. And he goes on to say the Cooperative Management of Mineral Rights Act will clarify existing law, put the brakes on more excessive litigation over oil and gas production in the Allegheny National Forest, and ensure mineral owners access to their property, Thompson said. And the bill would clarify existing law and codify the U.S. District Court rulings regarding private ownership of mineral rights in the national forest system. And approximately 93% of mineral rights in the Allegheny National Forest are privately held. And the reason this is coming up is that a federal law had passed in 1992 that required the Forest Service to write new regulations on oil and gas production in the ANF. And in 2009, the Forest Service entered into a settlement agreement with environmental groups, and a subsequent decision was made by then Forest Supervisor Leanne Martin. Those two actions changed the longstanding practice of the Forest Service in dealing with owners of private mineral rights within the national forest by effectively halting new drilling on the forest until a forest-wide environmental impact assessment could be made under the NEPA, or National Environmental Policy Act. So this is interesting because, this particular case where you have 93% of minerals that are privately owned on national forest land, the government is kind of holding them hostage and being able to, like the earlier news article, enjoy the benefits of responsible oil and gas development by, getting royalty payments or by leasing and so forth. And this one's another pretty interesting one, as this has come up before. So this is kind of same song, second verse here, where this is the third time that this Representative Thompson has introduced similar legislation. And the Pennsylvania State House of Representatives had previously passed legislation twice. But it stalled in the Senate. So it'll be interesting to see if Pennsylvania can get this one across the line to help out those mineral owners that are affected by this particular decision. So, I don't know. What do you think, Justin?
This is definitely an interesting one. And from an investment standpoint, it would be an interesting part of the portfolio to keep your eye on. It's kind of a touchy topic when you're talking about the Natural Forest Service. And like you said, those people being having the right to receive the royalty payments from those. This is actually news to me. I didn't realize that was something that was a problem, but could absolutely see how if you had inherited those or whatever the case may be, it could certainly make an effect on your portfolio.
Yeah, you bring up a good point, I think, with the value aspect. And so if they're not able to go and develop those minerals, then it certainly has a significant negative impact on the value of those minerals, even though there might be prospective reserves there that could be developed. So yeah, it'd be interesting for those folks if they will see this pass, and then hopefully it'll provide them the ability to get market value for their minerals. So. Okay, well, next one here is interesting in Iowa. So this is for all you out there in Iowa. It says, is Northeast Iowa rolling in valuable minerals? So beneath hills and valleys, cliffs and woodlands that bejewel the landscape around Duluth, Minnesota, scientists have discovered a figurative gold mine in the form of actual mineral mining potential. And Iowa researchers believe something at least as valuable could be hiding in this state's northeast quarter. The prospect has University of Iowa-based geologists consumed with answering the question of whether an underground formation spanning 10 Iowa counties is similar to the geologic complex beneath the Duluth area, which analysts say contains minerals worth up to $1 trillion. The UI-based Iowa Geological Survey finds the Northeast Iowa Formation is roughly the same age as its Minnesotan counterpart. Researchers believe the Hawkeye State could be harboring economically valuable deposits of copper, nickel, platinum, and other minerals. So this is an interesting one. I just threw it in here because it's not oil and gas related, but we got to remember that mineral rights cover really all forms of minerals, and that could get into actually hard rock mining and so forth. And so if you have the mineral rights in Iowa and kind of the northeast portion, something to keep an eye on and see what the Iowa Geologic Survey and the USGS come up with, and if they're able to get funding to drill some core samples to do some research in that area to further delineate that formation. And interesting here, one of the things this article mentions is that the difference between the Duluth and Northeast Iowa complexes is the ownership of the land. And in the Duluth case, it's mostly on public property. Iowa's situation is different. Most of its underground potential sits under privately owned land. So that means that anyone who wants to come in and develop these resources would have to negotiate with individual landowners over access and royalties. And so this is something that could benefit mineral owners in Iowa. So definitely keep an eye on it.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of happy geologists right now in Iowa.
Yes. Yeah. A lot of work coming up for them if they get funding for those that exploration work. So
Absolutely. And the article also goes on to kind of mention as well that in Minnesota, a lot of the lands that are owned are for the benefit of public schools, and they go into a school land trust, which has a great benefit as well. No complaints there.
yeah, it's a win-win, I think, really, in all cases in this article.
All right, now we're going to kind of jump into some of the production numbers and just kind of what's going on with some of the companies in the oil and gas industry. The first one here is kind of a general one. U.S. crude production rose in November to 11.9 million barrels per day. U.S. crude oil production rose to a new high of 11.9 million barrels per day in November, up 345,000 barrels per day from the previous month. The U.S. Energy Information Administration said in a monthly report on January 31st, which is absolutely nothing but good news.
Yeah, this is good. So next article talks about Chesapeake Energy, and they closed a nearly $4 billion acquisition of Eagleford producer Wildhorse. And article summary says Chesapeake Energy completed its acquisition of Wildhorse Resource Development Corp. On February 1st, creating an Eagleford oil producing powerhouse. So this is interesting because Chesapeake Energy has definitely pivoted over the past few years. They had some, financial troubles after the downturn. They were having to divest a lot of assets to keep things afloat. And they're back in buying mode. So things are looking up for them, I think.
Absolutely. And from an investment standpoint, too, there's lots of news articles going around about how Chesapeake is coming back up. One of the news articles going around the last few days is one of the directors of Chesapeake bought shares, which has kind of driven a buy opportunity with the Chesapeake stock. Great to hear that. Over the last few years, like Matt said, they weren't really doing that great. So the next one here is about Exxon. They're planning to double profit by combining exploration units. Oil major ExxonMobil said January 31st it would create 3 new separate E&P companies effective April 1st in an effort to double its profits by 2025. I know in the Permian Basin, Exxon has really geared it up and is taking over a lot of lands and trying to drill a lot of wells and sign a lot of leases. Sounds like that's absolutely on their track, and should be seeing more of that over the next couple of years.
Yeah, definitely. The last one is talking about ConocoPhillips. ConocoPhillips pursues more growth opportunities as production rises. In the lower 48 Big Three, Eagleford, Bakken, and Permian Basin, ConocoPhillips plans to grow production by about 19% this year. So for all you mineral owners in those 3 basins, that is good news, I think. So they're looking to even despite the slight downturn in oil price at the end of 2018, they're still looking at trying to grow production, which means they're going to be spending money. So good news there for everybody in those areas.
And kind of one final thing, Matt, that's interesting that I've seen kind of going around, and I'd love to get your take on it. I've heard seen a lot of stories about different operators talking about focusing in the Permian Basin on the shale plays because it allows them to quickly react to oil and gas prices going lower. Um, could you talk a little bit about what the science behind that? Why is that? Why is that different than the Bakken, or why is it different than some of the other wells in other places?
Well, I don't know the geology well enough between those three basins to say one way or the other, but I would assume that it is due to there being flexibility in that formation to allow them potentially to choke back production a little bit without damaging the formation. So that's one of the big concerns is when you drill these wells is, you really don't want to usually shut them in for a long period of time. You could have adverse effects on the overall productivity of that well. So it might have something to do with that. Another part of it too is just that with these shale plays in general, or just unconventional plays, is they have the ability to turn on production quickly when the prices go up, as well as slow down on investment when the prices go down. So because they can go and drill a well in a week or two and then complete it in a couple of weeks, as so long as there's the infrastructure in place and easy access to building well pads, they can get in there quickly and develop areas and drill lots of wells with when things are looking good, when the economic conditions are favorable. And so that's part of, I think, why that is the case. They're getting to the situation where they can go in quickly and decide whether they want to ramp it up or if they want to hold back and wait for things to get better.
Absolutely. And I know from 2012 to 2017, a lot of the oil and gas companies, they put a ton of focus on being sure that they could be profitable at the lower oil and gas prices. So hopefully as the market goes on and we do see fluctuations, we'll see that be true with some of the bigger companies.
All right. Well, that concludes our first news episode on mineral rights. And let us know what you think. Also, if you come across any interesting news articles you want to send our way, you can do so by sending us an email to feedback@mineralrightspodcast.com. Thanks again for listening, Justin.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Matt.
Thanks so much for listening to the Mineral Rights Podcast with your host, Matt Sands. Don't forget to subscribe and share at mineralrightspodcast.com. The Mineral Rights Podcast should not be construed as investment, legal, or tax advice. All information is believed to be from reliable sources. However, we make no representation as to its completeness or accuracy.